Hi, I'm Erin. I'm a clinical herbalist and aromatherapist in the Pacific Northwest, and I teach herbal aromatherapy at florinella.com. This month we're focusing on rosemary because it's one of the plants that is looking really great in my Zone 8B garden right now. Last week we talked about how to do respiratory steam with rosemary, either fresh, dried, or its essential oil. And today I'm going to show you how I like to infuse rosemary into carrier oil so that I can use that as a base oil for some of my aromatic and herbal blends. The first thing that you're going to want to do is harvest your rosemary. You want to harvest healthy looking rosemary that doesn't have a lot of pest damage or any signs of disease. Get that either into your dehydrator or onto a cookie sheet lined with a tea towel, something that will allow you to spread your rosemary out in a single layer so that you can dry it. I dried mine in the dehydrator after giving it a quick rinse because I live in an urban area with a lot of air pollution and contamination that can end up on my herbs, so I prefer to rinse them before drying them. I've just taken my sprigs of rosemary out of the dehydrator. It took only about 20 hours for them to dry fully, and I'm going to chop them up a little bit so that we can get them into some carrier oil, and then I'm going to infuse this using the low and slow method, which uses a slow cooker or a crock pot. I have an article on the Florinella website that shows you all of the different ways you can infuse herbs into your carrier oil and why you might want to choose one way over another. So if that's something you're interested in learning more about, you can see that article on florinella.com. Click on sample lessons there from the main menu and you'll be able to find that. So I'm going to go ahead and get these leaves off of my sprigs of rosemary, and then I'm going to chop them up a little bit. The easiest way to get leaves off of a sprig of dried rosemary is to just pull your hand downward, going against the direction of the leaves. So you just grasp it at the top and then pull your fingers downward like this. You might have a few that you need to come back and pull off afterwards, but that's no problem. Rosemary has been found in clinical studies to have anti-inflammatory properties. So one of the ways that I really like to work with it topically is in infused oils that can be used as massage oils or as a carrier for topical aromatherapy blends for people who are experiencing musculoskeletal pain and inflammation. You want to make sure that you're working with dried rosemary if you're going to be making infused oils. You don't want to be introducing any moisture into your oil because it can cause it to either mold or cause the oil to go rancid really quickly, and you don't really want that. You want your remedies to be able to last in your apothecary or your pantry for at least a year, so that if you're working with something that you can only harvest once a year, you know that you have enough until your next harvest or until the next commercial harvest of that herb, so that you know you have what you need. The amount of dried rosemary that you're going to need is going to depend on how big of a batch of infused oil you're making. I'm going to be making about a pint-sized jar of infused oil, so I need quite a bit of chopped rosemary, and this will lose some of its loft when I chop it as well. Once you have a good amount of dried rosemary, you can start chopping it into smaller pieces. Be a little bit gentle here. It will try to fly away from you if you are too vigorous, but you don't really need to be super aggressive about it. You could also stick this into a mortar and pestle. You could stick it into a coffee grinder. You could grind it as fine as a powder if you wanted to, but you don't have to. Just a bit of a rough chop is sufficient. Okay, I'm going to see how much of my jar can be filled with what I have here. So you can see how that looked like quite a bit of rosemary, but once you get it chopped a little bit, that density or that loft of the herb goes down a little bit. And so I'm actually going to try to get a little bit more plant material before I pour oil over this. So this is about what you want, about half full for your jar. I'm now going to take some organic, unrefined sunflower seed oil and I'm going to pour it over the rosemary. I like to use sunflower seed oil because it's a really light oil. It doesn't feel super greasy on the skin. Olive oil is one of the oils that has traditionally been used for topical herbal remedies and blends, but I find that it can feel really heavy and greasy for a lot of people, and I just prefer the feel of sunflower oil because it doesn't feel that way. It's very light. So you want to just pour that over, let it settle. You could use a chopstick or a butter knife to kind of make sure that everything is looking good and that the oil has not caught in any little pockets of dried material. But that looks pretty good to me. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to put a lid on this. And then I have a crock pot here that's set to high. It's been preheating, and I'm going to set this in here. There's about an inch or two of water in here. And I'm going to just set that in there. I have the lid on to make sure that no steam is getting into the oil. So you want to keep that like that. You don't have to cover the crock pot with the lid. And I'm going to let that sit in there for a few hours. I'm going to go ahead and turn it down to low now so that I don't cook the herbs, but I did want it on high just to get it warmed up. So what's going to happen now is this heat from this bath is going to allow this oil to infuse more quickly than it would if it was at room temperature. At room temperature, infused oils can take 4 to 6 weeks, and in a crock pot like this, it might be done in a few hours or in a day or two. So I'm going to go ahead and leave this sit for a little while, and then we'll come back and make a massage oil blend with our infused rosemary oil. After a few hours in the crock pot, your infused oil will be ready for you to strain, and you can see that mine has taken on quite a bit of a green color already just from that short amount of time. I like to use a potato ricer to strain my oils. It's an easy way to do it by hand without having to invest in a really large press. But this is basically just a glorified garlic press. You put your potatoes in here normally, and then you just press down and it rices your potatoes for you. But when you line it with a piece of muslin or a couple layers of cheesecloth or a paper towel like I'm going to use here, then you can pour your oil through, press it out into a container of some sort, and it allows you to strain the herb or plant material out of your oil really easily. So that's what we're going to do. I'm going to go ahead and line this with a paper towel. So I've just lined mine with a paper towel. I'm going to set this over top of a 2-cup Pyrex measuring cup. I'm using this because it has a pouring spout on it, which will make it really easy for me to pour this oil out after it's strained. I'm just going to dump this in here. You might have to do it in sections, and it will want to come out in clumps. If you're making this for someone else, you'll want to use something on your hands, and maybe a spatula to do this so that you're not actually touching it, but this is just for me, so I'm not going to worry about that. Once you've got a little bundle in there, and if you press it, you can get more. That will help strain out most of the plant material from your carrier oil, and then you can add a bit of vitamin E as an antioxidant to help slow the process of the oil aging and going rancid. That will help prolong the shelf life of your infused oil a little bit. This particular oil also has some of the resinous compounds from the rosemary leaves in it as well. Heat helps to coax those resinous compounds out of our plant material, which is why we often will use heat when we're making things like rosemary infused oil or calendula infused oil. What you can do with this now is use it as a base for all kinds of topical use products. You could also use it in your cooking if you wanted to, but for topical use products, you could use this on its own as a massage oil for sore muscles or joints, aches and pains and things like that. You could also use it as a base for aromatherapy recipes, so you could use it as a base or a carrier oil for a roll-on blend that you want to use for a specific area that's causing you some pain. You could also use it as a carrier oil in salves or balms, ointments, body butters, lotion bars, creams and lotions, any kind of topical recipe that requires the use of a carrier oil. You could use this instead to introduce some anti-inflammatory effects to your final remedy. I'm going to pour some of this off into a frosted glass bottle here that I have pre-prepared. And this bottle has a top that has a pump dispenser on it, so that this will be really easy to use once it's bottled up. You can see that color looks so pretty with that frosted glass container. These little stainless steel funnels make pouring into smaller bottles like this much easier. So this bottle has a little pump dispenser so that it can be administered really easily, and this will be a great way to store this, and the rest I'll use for something else. If you want to learn more about rosemary and how to work with it therapeutically in your home apothecary, feel free to visit our website at floranella.com and check out our Herbal Aromatherapy Certification Program, in which I teach you how to work with herbs and their hydrosols and essential oils from the garden to the still to the apothecary. I'll see you in the next video.